And again, Gills fans, welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Blood TV. As you can see, the band are back together for episode 7 of Gills in the Pub. But we're not in a pub. Maybe one day we will get in a pub. But I do have a beer. Jack has some new curtains. Reece has got to go football training, so he's being ultra professional. Gents, this is going to be ever so different compared to previous episodes, isn't it? We're all smiling already, which is a big change.
Yeah. Happy days, mate. Happy days. The first positive one I think we've ever done.
I think it will be, yeah. And obviously we've got to gloss over the stuff that happened between the last episode, which I think was the 13th of November, up until the 23rd of December. So there is going to be some, I don't want to say negative, but some more low-key stuff. Yeah, it's negative. I'm not going to lie. It will be rubbish, the first bit. But the main idea of this episode is to concentrate on what's been going on since the 23rd of December when Mr. Gallinson confirmed that he'd taken over. But we're going to have to rewind all the way back first. We've got some kind of schedule. Like I say, last episode was the 13th of November. We were still in 2 cup competitions, but we just lost, Reece, 2-0 at home to Northampton Town. Another one of them performances where we'd actually been all right for about 40 minutes. And then I think Will Wright decided to pass it to the top scorer in the division. And he smashed one in the roof of the net. And from there, it was pretty much copy and paste. We had a go. We conceded another soft goal. We never looked like getting back into the game. It was another blank. And I've written down, it was the third of what ended up being 7 successive scoreless games in the league as we broke our own horrendously poor record in front of goal for the second time in a season. Back then, I don't think any of us could have seen what's going on now, could we?
No, let's be honest. I think at that stage, obviously, we're talking pre-takeover. I think it had got to the point where, as depressing as it was, we was all resigned to the fact that unless the miracle happened, which obviously it did in time, but we'd come on to that, we was going to be going into the National League. It was going to be, like you said, we wasn't getting battered very often, but we couldn't buy a goal, which meant we was never going to win a game. It probably didn't help the players, especially the defenders, knowing that they were under so much pressure to keep clean sheets, knowing that if they let one in, that was it. That was game gone. We weren't going to win. And it just looked like everyone, players, staff, Harris, they were all in a rut where confidence had gone, and I don't think there was any belief that no matter what they tried, it just wasn't going to work. And we were seeing that week in, week out. Nothing really changed. Well, in terms of the actual results, teams changed, formations changed. Harris tried as many different formulas as possible to try and get a result. Nothing clicked. And I think obviously we'll come on to where we are now, but ultimately it probably just was down to lack of quality in the end.
I think it shows how sorry, Matt, I was just saying, I think it just shows how poor we were, that we've took 12 points from the last 10 points from the last 12 games, and we're still in a position where we're actually in the relegation zone still. It doesn't bear thinking about what would have happened if he hadn't taken over. Like, I think we'd be gone already, wouldn't we? Let's be honest.
I think Jack means 10 from the last 12 available. Sorry there, Gills fans. He's just not 10 from 12. Come on, Jack, we're better than that now.
10 from 12 points available.
That's
yes.
it, there we go. So we're all giddy. We can't even cope. We don't even know what we're saying. Such is the turnaround. But yeah, I'd written down, just to re-emphasise what Reece has said, things were very, very bleak. Relegation was a probability, not a possibility. The only saving grace was the cup runs. And I think it was around November time, and I'll come back to you in a second there, Jack, that I decided to take a break from doing match preview shows, Monday review shows, and I was just concentrating on the match day vlogs. It got to the point where I think, and I wasn't the only one, I was going because I'd paid for a season ticket. I had all these visions back in the summer of picking up new grounds, League Two, adventure and all that, to be positive after relegation. I went to Wimbledon first day of the season. I didn't do another away day until between Christmas and New Year, and we lost that as well. It's just been soul destroying, I think is probably the right word.
Yeah, it's not been great, has it? To be honest, it sucked the life out of all of us, really. To be honest, I think, obviously I wasn't going for various reasons, and obviously the way we were playing was part of a factor of that, but it was mainly down to Scally. But obviously, let's not be negative regarding that we've moved on. But I think it's a testament to where we are as a club now that I'm now a season ticket holder. Yeah, I've been doing the new grounds as well, mate. But yeah, we were all resigned to our fate, weren't we? And I think a lot of people I think a lot of people fell out of love with the club for a number of years, actually. But I think these last 2 seasons have really been a chore for a lot of people. And you never stop loving your club, and you know the love never goes, but the like for it, going to matches had gone for a number of people, I think.
Yeah, I think you can almost describe it to like a relationship with a family member. Sometimes you fall out and you don't like each other, but you carry on loving them. But at times you just think, I don't want anything to do with you. And that's what it became, I think, Reece, for pretty much all of the fan base regarding Gillingham Football Club, wasn't it?
No, and I was very similar to you. Went to Wimbledon that first game of the season, and then I didn't do another away game until Colchester, and then did two in a row, two in a week. But and and obviously it's similar to you, and it's not because we're glory supporters and we only go when we think we might win. It's the fact that we'd got into such a situation where, the way times are at the moment, I just could not justify to myself the time and the expense of 60 quid a hit for an away day to go and watch us, knowing we're not going to score a goal, let alone win. And I take my hat off to absolutely anyone that's still week in, week out, heading up and down the country, watching us, knowing that the chances are more likely than not the scoreline's going to say Gillingham 0, and it was just a case of whether we could keep a clean sheet and take a point or not. But no, it was bleak. It was really, really bleak. And like you, there was grounds I wanted to do this season that I've ended up swerving just because I didn't want to do it. I couldn't justify it. Home games were bad enough. And yeah, it just didn't appeal to me to go and watch the away games. But obviously, like Jack said, we'll move on to the positives, and my mindset's changed quite a lot in the last month or so.
Yeah, I think it has for all of us. And I remember having a conversation. I can't remember it might have been Harry Kinslow, I think, who is one of them. And again,
Done every single one, and every single one.
I think he tweeted a couple of weeks ago. So he's done 100 consecutive games. So tip your hat to that. Fair play, because that is a lot of. I mean, we're dedicated fans, and there's, the debate goes around: are you more dedicated if you go to games or if you just watch on iFollow or that type of thing for various reasons? But that's phenomenal dedication to a cause that was pretty much a lost cause for the best part of 2 years, certainly the last 18 months. And I had a chat with him, I think, and I put something out, I can't remember, sort of probably around the same time that I decided to have a little bit of a break from doing the channel content, and just said it wasn't even affecting my weekend anymore. We'd become so numb to it, and so sort of it was ingrained into us that we were not going to score and we were going to lose. And as soon as that first goal we conceded, that was game over. I said it was the saddest thing was that it wasn't even sad anymore. It wasn't affecting my weekend. And we had a little bit of a conversation and a disagreement on Twitter. And that's the point of that social media platform. But I don't know what you two think, but that was literally my feelings towards the football club. It was just so much apathy that it was like, oh, we've lost again, but that's no different. It's not, I'm not going to let it ruin my weekend anymore.
Yeah, it was the same for me, mate. I think I said that in a previous episode that apathy had drawn in. I wasn't disappointed I was disappointed when we lost, but you've kind of expected it. And resigned myself to the fact we were going to get relegated. And do you know what? I'm one of these people that's, if we went to the National League, I'd still enjoy going to watch them. It's all about the buzz of going to watch your team. It would have been a whole host of new grounds. But and let's not forget, we're still not out of that. But our whole world's changed, and the fact it has is amazing, really, for everyone, and it's transformed the football club. We feel like a united club again, and we're all pulling in the right direction. Everyone, I think that was one of the worst things about the situation as well before, that too many people across varying factions just didn't like each other anymore either, really, it seemed to be. Whereas, I think everyone seems to be pulling in the right direction, which is great.
Yeah, totally agree. I think Reece is a member of our Facebook page. I know Reece doesn't do Facebook too much, and to be honest, I don't. I use it more for the Facebook Gills in the Blood page. I'm a lurker on Facebook. I read other people's business, but don't put too much of my own on there, to be quite frank. But it got to that point, hadn't it, Reece, where it was just everywhere you turned, you was disagreeing with someone, and you was disagreeing with someone over something really trivial as well, and it just wasn't a fun place to be. But again, it was so predictable and so repetitive that we almost just got used to it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I'm quite bad with things like that. Is that I've not got an awful lot of self-discipline, that I can't bite my tongue when I see something I disagree with relating to Gills. But yeah, it it was silly things, and it was just cool. We was all in that downbeat mindset and just had to vent, had to get things off our chest, and sometimes it came across as quite heated arguments, and we've all been there. But yeah, like you both say, fortunately we do now seem to, generally speaking, as a fan base, put in the same direction. You're always going to get some that don't like to toe that line just for the sake of it, but fortunately that's very much in the minority now, and the majority of the fan base is pulling in the same direction as with everyone else at the club. And I don't think it's a surprise that that's sitting hand in hand with the upturn in form on the pitch as well.
Yeah, totally agree. There was the probably the only positives in the first half of the campaign, which was very, very trying for all of us, players, fans, staff, was the 2 cup runs. I think without them, everyone would have probably given up a lot earlier. Neil Harris might have been out of a job, but that's probably for another episode. I know we all have varying views on Neil Harris and how he survived, but we'll probably talk about that more in the second part of the episode. But Brentford away, I missed. You two both were lucky enough to go.
I didn't go.
Oh, you didn't go. Jack was lucky enough to go. You saw me, Commander, score a goal and win a header in the opposition box. So that was, sort of justification in itself.
The limbs were unbelievable in that away end. To be honest, I've been quite lucky that the games I've gone to over the last couple of years, I've actually seen a decent amount of goals, even away from home, especially. But that was a special away day, and I think I said on the last episode that if Gallinson was there, that showed the best of the club, and I think that's what's happened since. We've almost got that vibe at away league games.
That was the brochure to say, if you're interested in coming to buy us, come and watch this 90, 120 minutes and just see everything that we're about. And that was talked about in the last episode. I get that. We then went to Wolves and only got done by a soft penalty and a late goal when we were somewhat chasing the game. The FA Cup was a bit of a struggle. Went to Fylde, I think, in the first round. Drew, weren't great. Managed to pinch the replay 1-0. Even missed a penalty in that game. That's been one thing that we were good at during the first half of the campaign. Then went to Dagenham and really got away with one. I remember watching it on a stream on a betting app with no commentary, and we really, really got out of jail late on there for his Scott Cashkit. But the replay was really entertaining, to be fair. I don't know if either of you two went to that game. It was live on BBC Three.
I watched it on TV.
Yeah, I probably would have done, but I'd had a rough week and I thought, right, let's get out of the house and go. And to be fair, it ended up being worth the visit because there was goals, there was errors, the pitch was freezing actually at the time of the game, and we did our best to mess it up again. And I remember watching at the time and thinking, just after Maxima had messed up that header back towards Jake Turner in goal and they'd nipped in to equalise. And like I say, we've all got opinions on Neil Harris. There was just such a look of resignation on his face, and I really felt for him that night because we worked so hard to get in front, having trailed 1-0. And then the bloke who should have been the hero, Maxima, quickly turned into some sort of villain with such a poor back header. But you can't beat a last-minute goal in any competition, regardless of level and how many fans are in the stadium. And I'm not saying it was the same as Brentford, not by any stretch of the imagination, but I was in the Medway stand that night and ended up hugging 3 or 4 blokes that I've never sat next to before. And that's the beauty of this football club and football in general. And we then got the Leicester tie, but we'll come on to that later on. But Reece, how do you think the season could have potentially panned out if you take the cup runs away? Because we know the league form was beyond horrific. Do you think there's a case that Neil would have gone back in the autumn without the cup run?
Tough question. Honestly, no, I don't think he would have done. Because I think the league form was bad enough that if Fisher or Scally or Gallinson from behind the scenes wanted to change, I think they'd have pulled the plug on that regardless. But the cut runs were obviously a welcome distraction. Like you say, we wasn't brilliant in any of the games against the National League sides. But let's be honest, in my lifetime watching Gills anyway, notoriously, we don't even necessarily get past the National League teams more often than not anyway. So I was quite happy for us to beat them, slogging it out. It was just a case of trying to get through them games and hoping that it would give us some sort of spark for league games to get going. But as we know, that never really happened. I'm sure pretty much every cup game we won, we probably lost the next league game anyway. So
without scoring, probably.
Yeah,
But
I imagine so. Yeah, and Jack, coming to you now, obviously we know the struggles in the league in terms of being in front of goal. Defensively, we've not been bad all season, but like we've already mentioned, if you're conceding a goal and you're only scoring one every 3.5 league games, you're going to struggle to win football matches. We were somewhat free scoring in the cup. I think we scored in pretty much every game in the FA Cup run up to the Leicester defeat. I know there was a couple of shootout wins in the earlier rounds of the League Cup, but I think we was going over a goal a game, which was phenomenal compared to the league form. What do you think it was potentially that just a freedom, that it was a knockout game potentially that meant we were not as scared to concede a goal in the FA Cup and the League Cup?
I think exactly that, mate. I think it, well, in the FA Cup, probably playing lesser opposition. The fact that there's no, I guess there is jeopardy, to be fair, because if you lose to a non-league team, that's probably worse than losing a league game. I think they're just, the mindset probably changes because it's a different competition, and probably playing worse teams would be what I'd say. But that being said, in the League Cup, we got past teams that were broadly on the same level as us, didn't we? To be fair, so
I think we beat Wimbledon, didn't we, first round? Then we knocked out Exeter on penalties, or a division above. Yeah, so yeah, in terms of the League Cup, it was fairly even matchups.
Yeah, I'd say the freedom, mate. I think you're probably right. I think, against the FA Cup or in the FA Cup games, there is obviously, we're playing worse teams, so that does have an effect. But I think the freedom, I think you're probably right. The mindset probably changed. This is a free hit, we can go for it, and the shackles were off. It maybe does circle back potentially to the tactical strategy of Harris sometimes in games. You lads know that I think he's a bit too cautious at times in games. I'd even say the same for the Swindon game. I think dropping back to a 5 was the reason why we potentially drew that game. So I do have a feeling that tactics were potentially an issue during the first half of the season. I've made the case that, and let's not be negative now. Let's move forward. But we were never, in my opinion, a 7-goal in 24 games. Was it? Team, which to me, even though the budget was obviously horrendous and there was a lot going on behind the scenes, I do feel that a factor of that must have been down to the way we were tactically set up. So I think that's possibly had a factor in the league as well.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us have sat here and said that Neil's not culpable at all, have we, Reece? He has to play a part because Jack's mentioned the budget. We know it was poor, but Neil Harris knew that in the summer, and he then had to spend that budget as he chose. And there was a couple of interesting ones. We know the Lewis Walker one raised a few eyebrows with, we've chased him for 4 weeks. Yeah, he went to Wimbledon on trial and played 2 games there up front with Josh Parker, ironically, I think, as well. But obviously we're seeing signs now, but we'll get to that later on. But yeah, back to what you said in terms of the cup game, it was almost great to see us manage to get through against the likes of AFC Fylde and Dagenham and Redbridge, because we know that there's been too many Dovers and Brackleys over the last few years, hasn't there?
Yeah, Brackley twice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Twice. Burscough.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, I forgot
Barnet
about that
when
one.
they was in non-league, I think.
Yeah, there's a few others. There's a few others along the way, I think, as well.
Yeah, I can think of 5 or 6, and I've only been going 20 years this year. So yeah.
Yeah, nice to actually get through them.
Essentially, teams that are in the first 4 letters of the alphabet, if they're on non-league, we're in real trouble, basically, is what we're saying there. Cup run is clearly now out the way. We know that. We lost to Leicester in the 3rd round, and we'll get onto that because it was the first game that the Gallinsons were live at. So we will touch on that later on in the episode. But back to the league form, and Gills fans, please stick with us because we're getting towards the end of the negative part of the show. We really are, but we have to talk about it. I've written down wretched as autumn turned into winter. We've already mentioned the Northampton game. We lost 2-0. After that, it went Newport, lost 2-0. Crawley, drew 0-0. Salford, lost 3-0. Colchester, lost 1-0. Sutton, lost 2-1. But I did write in big capitals, scored a goal, though. I mean, because that's how desperate we were for silver linings and positives at that stage. And Stevenage 1-0. And again, it comes back to the point, Jack, that we've not been thrashed in any of them games. If you go through them, Newport, I think Jake Turner made an error for the first, and then we were chasing the game. Crawley, Joe Bodie missed an absolute sitter from about 3 yards, bless him. And we're not going to sit here and dig out, a kid that's trying to help out a team that's shot shy. But you could probably say if that was a Tom Nichols or an Ollie Hawkins now, we win that football match because we were better side on the night. Salford, I thought we were brilliant first half and then just didn't come out second period and got absolutely bashed in terms of the scoreline at least. But it certainly wasn't a 3-0 game first 45 minutes. Colchester, we were just ranked horrible and they were slightly less ranked horrible in my opinion. Sutton battled back to get level and then shot ourselves in the foot in the last couple of minutes. Stevenage, we were decent, probably deserved a point and switched off from a set piece. So again, it was the same old problems that had hindered us all campaign long, that we weren't scoring enough and them key moments were just falling the wrong side of the line for us, weren't they, Jack?
Yeah, I think it does slightly go back again, as I say, to some of the tactical stuff. You know, I don't feel like we played with the handbrake off at all. And ironically, I think I heard Harris say the other day that's how he likes his teams to play, but it never really come across like that in the first half of the season. It has to be said. But so it's interesting. It would be interesting if there was a parallel universe where we could run it, where you know someone like Evans or whoever that had that team for the first half of the season, just to see if they'd have got a better tune out of them. Because I do feel we massively underperformed. Even though the players were shocking. I think Gallinson said in the forum that he felt that they were like an 18th or 19th team. So so even he, because you know, he doesn't probably know much about football compared to others, obviously, but he felt that it was an underperforming team. So yeah, it was just. I'm glad we can look beyond it now, but it was a terrible time, really. Let's be honest. Like every game we went into, I wasn't even expecting us to score, let alone win the game.
No, I think that's probably pretty much how we were all feeling, wasn't it, Reece? But it comes back to, and I know Jack's sort of had a look at the tactical setup and the fact that we were probably inviting too much pressure, and I can understand the frustration from a fan's point of view, but you can also understand Neil Harris's point of view, because by that point, he's probably not trusting that group of players to score him goals. So he's got to find a way to just dig in and stay in football matches. But to the Brad Galinson point about 18th, 19th, it probably wouldn't take a great deal out of them portion of games that I've just mentioned for us to have been around 18th, 19th. If Joe Bode scores from 6 yards, you've got another 2 points. Colchester was a game that could have gone either way. That's another point you could have earned. Stevenage, I said we switched off. That's another. You're looking at another 4 or 5 points there just from little moments in games, and that would have made a huge difference. But the big problem was in that period, 4 points and 4 goals. And at the time of the Stevenage defeat, we were 12 without a win in League Two. That last victory coming back on October the 1st, and that was a last-minute winner against Sutton United, I think. And even then, we managed to actually score some goals and had 3 chalked off. Some rightly, some not so much. But have you boys got anything? Because I know I've written notes. I know you were potentially writing notes that you want to gloss over or talk about before we get into the second half of the show, which is going to be from the early Christmas present onwards.
Most of my notes are around that, mate, to be fair.
That's what I like to hear, because I think as a fan base, and certainly doing this show and this channel, we deserve to talk about something more positive. So I've written down at the bottom of the first page, Santa had an early Christmas present.
Absolutely.
23rd of December. I don't know what you two boys were doing. I'm assuming you were both off for Christmas and enjoying the festivities. I was sat on my sofa enjoying a beer and a mince pie, probably. Just looking at Twitter, the TV was on. There was probably a Christmas film on in the background that I'd seen about 300 times. The corner flag came up. Well, one of them generic pictures that we usually get when there's some sort of club statement. And I think we'd had more club statements than goals and certainly points in the first half of the campaign for various reasons. This one was slightly different though. And I think I've said this on previous episodes. I remember reading it the first time and I was like, oh, we've been taken over. And then I read it back again and it got me. It really, really got me. And it's getting me now, because this does matter. And this is something that, and we know people use the phrase, it's just a game, but it's not when you put your money and your time and you travel up and down the country, whether that's 46 times a season, 30 times a season, 20 times a season. You do it because you care and you do it because you love that football club. And that was the time I went, we might just have our football club back.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly how I reacted to it, mate, to be fair. I think I was on my sofa. I think I'd actually tweeted Fisher and Gallinson earlier that day, because he'd replied back to someone saying that it definitely was Paul Fisher. Because I thought that Gallinson account was just a fake one that someone had made up with all the rumours.
So did I. So did I.
And so when he replied, I was like, "Oh, that's what's going on here." And then I said, "How about sorting this takeover, lads?" And then about an hour later, it did happen. And honestly, I think the overriding feeling was just elation, the fact that we've got our club back. And do you know what? At that point, we had no idea. Well, actually, no, we did, didn't he? He said an aggressive transfer window on that video. I was going to say we didn't know what we'd be in for, but yeah, fantastic. There's no, do you know what? At that point, I'd have taken absolutely anyone, I think, taking over the football club, because we needed a united club. We needed a bit of hope, and I think anyone else would have given us that. But we've absolutely landed on our feet, I think, with the Gallinsons. And one of the things I've been told by a few people who work for the club is that, you know, on a personal level, that they sort of met with them, I think, sort of October, November time, getting to know people before they made the takeover. And I think this comes across in everything they've done so far, but they're just genuinely lovely people, it seems. And they've, you know, on a personal level, they were asking, you know, these staff members, oh, you know, tell us about your family, kind of thing. So it was getting to know them, just really salt of the earth, nice people. And I think we'd have taken someone who wasn't particularly nice, but we've absolutely landed on our feet. I can't say any more than that, really.
Yeah, Reece, I'm going to come to you, obviously, because Jack's given us his reaction and I've already explained mine. And he's definitely right. We have landed on our feet in terms of the financial side of things, the way they've gone about their business in the first 6 weeks, but the fact that they do genuinely seem like they care as well. And back to the account that we all thought was a parody account, and we all thought it was someone just messing about and changing their Twitter handle and stuff like that. I remember them replying to me. That account replied to me when I changed my name to Nils in the Blood, and they said, "What?" And he said, "What would it take to change your name back? A goal, a win, or a takeover?" And I can't even remember if I replied or just sort of politely favoured it because I thought it was just someone on the wind up. It was actually him. So he'd clearly been taking the time to get to know us as a fan base without letting us get to know him. What was your immediate reaction that evening of the 23rd of December? And to expand on that, potentially how much of a defining day in this club's history could that be, looking back in 5-10 years' time?
Oh, it's monumental. It's probably the single biggest thing to happen to the football club in my lifetime. I was born April '95.
Can we say since Paul Scally took over?
Yeah, he wasn't born when he took over, were you, mate? So,
but yeah, like you lot, it was, especially with the timing as well, knowing that, you know, we was on a terrible run of form. We were pretty much resigned to relegation.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, on pretty much the eve of the January window, it was just a lifeline, something for us to grasp onto. And we all knew, look, just because a takeover's happening, our league position wasn't going to change overnight. We're seeing that now, like Jack said earlier. We've hit a purple patch. We're still 23rd in the league, but it was just that hope that suddenly, very, very slowly, we might start being able to turn the tide, and the club will start making forward strides for the better. And so far, so good in that regard. We know there's a lot more to do. Everyone said that. It's not going to happen in 6 weeks. It's probably not going to happen in 2 years. It's a much bigger job than that. But yeah, all hope was lost. And then just, yeah, with one link to a website, all of a sudden the complete mindset and attitude of you know what, 10, 15,000 people changed just like that.
I think that if you look back, it's kind of similar. Obviously, you weren't alive at this point, mate, and I was 7. But a similar feeling, if I recall, back to what it was like when Scally first took over. Albeit, you know, I think even then he got rid of the tea ladies, didn't he? So you could see kind of, you know, what was coming a little bit. But the Gallinsons have been different in that regard. But it's a takeover or sort of a change for something new is always a shot in the arm, which was always going to give us a boost. But I think they've exceeded expectations so far.
Yeah, I think they have, and you can almost go full circle. And we've said this, haven't we, since the takeover, and we've seen it on social media that the whole thing had gone full circle. And we can sit here and we can say thank you to Paul Scally for 5 years in the Championship, because we were punching above our weight. And let's not pretend otherwise. We are essentially a League One and a League Two football club, and we get that. But it had gone horribly wrong for a few years. And to go back to your comment, Jack, about you'd have taken anyone, I think it had got to the point where we almost just had to take a chance. I know due diligence and all that would have been done, and I know Paul Fisher would have done that, and I'm sure Paul Scally would have done that as well. But yeah, it felt as a fan base that we had to, something just had to change and had to give. We had to roll the dice, because it did feel very much like it was the last throw of that dice. But yeah, in terms of the Leicester game, which we'll get onto, and you linking it back to Paul Scally, the parallel was the Chelsea friendly,
game,
I think, wasn't it? Yeah, when Glenn Hoddle come down and helped us out, and Rudolph made his debut. I think Mark Hughes started. I think we even took the lead, didn't we?
Yeah.
Leo scored, yeah, on his debut. It was a full house. It was pretty much a full house against Leicester.
Yeah.
So yeah, everything seemed to have just come to almost a natural, organic conclusion in terms of just completely going full circle. And when Paul Scally took over, we were struggling in the basement tier of English football. So with one door shutting, one door opens. Before we get onto the financial side and the transfer window and everything that he promised and delivered on, two key words for me that I've taken out of everything that Brad Galinson said so far, whether that's been on Twitter or in his interviews on YouTube or at the Q&A session. If I had to pick two words, community, potential.
Yeah.
I don't know what you two think.
I think we've always had potential, mate. I think Scally recognised that.
Mm-hmm.
I think given that we're the only league club in Kent, the conurbation of Kent and Medway, there's loads and loads of potential, and I'm glad that he sees that. I think from his perspective, it's a blank canvas almost, really, in terms of where he can take us. I think one of the things actually he did say though was, he's not promising the earth, which I think is quite a key thing, to be honest. That's one of the things I've liked about him, is that, for all the will in the world with Scally, he promised a lot of stuff that he didn't deliver on, such as self-service pumps. I got it in, amongst a load of other things. But I think one of the things he said in that forum, people are asking about a new ground, and the guy was like, "Look, let's stay in the league and let's fill Priestfield first."
Yep.
So, as much as I did admire Scally's ambitions to a certain degree, I've said before they were champagne ambitions on lemonade money, and this guy seems to have kind of lemonade ambitions on prosecco money. Is probably the best way to describe it.
Reece, I'm going to come to you. I suppose the other big thing is we've not heard anything about ships being ready to sail, have we, as well? Which is always nice and refreshing, and I can totally understand what Jack's saying, because we plenty of times got promised this and that from Paul Scally, and it never got seen through. And I'm still waiting for my 1893 club membership, so because I gave back some money to the club during COVID, but I won't hold my breath. Maybe when we're in the Championship in 3 years, I'll go and ask Brad if I can, have a free drink in the piano bar. But
that's actually called the 1893 club. I did it the other day.
It is, yeah, and I'm still waiting for mine, so at least someone's taking use of it. We digress. Let's get on to the potential still. Sorry, not get on to, stay with. He's mentioned, Reece, all these local businesses. 75,000 is the number that Brad's put to it in terms of in Kent. I think there's very early signs off the pitch, and we will get to on the pitch very shortly, that he's saying all the right things, making all the right noises, but more importantly, he's doing all the right things, isn't he, in terms of making us more appealing to anyone that wants to have something to do with the football club, whether that's as a sponsor or a partner, before we even get to the stuff on the green grass.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of making people feel valued and actually coming across as if you're actually grateful for what they're doing. Obviously we was all at the fans forum, and he said, I think it was there, he said that, he looked at football clubs across all tiers, but sort of your Premier League, your Championship clubs were pretty much what they were, and there wasn't a lot of room for growth with them. So when people from outside the football club go, well, why is someone with that kind of resource taken over a League Two team? That's why. He's obviously looked at us and seen there's a lot of quick wins there. Mm-hmm. Because let's be honest, a well-run football club won't be staring back-to-back relegations in the face. So the fact we was in that situation said stuff needed to happen. And yeah, he's not. We've all said it for years and years about the potential of the catchment area, the amount of businesses around, and it just needs some time and effort channeled into that. And I think the fact that he's also spoken about when he's been asked in press interviews how hands-on he's going to be, sort of, well, I'm sort of here to resource it all, and I'll actually let people with the knowledge and expertise in particular fields deal with it, such as it seems like he's not really getting involved with the football side. He's obviously got Neil, he's brought Kenny and Hess in to deal with that side of things, so he's not getting involved in it. And that probably means that him and Fish can focus elsewhere on running the club off the pitch, and then the two come together, and hopefully it's going to mean a much brighter future for us.
Just on that point, mate, I've wrote that down actually. One of the things I've thought, you know, as much as you could say it's admirable for Scally to have tried to have run all of this on his own alongside Gwen, and notably we started to go downhill the moment she left, by the way. I think he tried to be all things to all men within the club. He tried to do every single thing, which, you know, maybe is his personality, maybe he just felt he didn't, you know, it wasn't right to delegate it, whatever it may be. But the fact he delegates it to other people, I think is a good trait. You know, he's not wanting to be the man in the ivory tower at the top, making every single decision. He is just pushing people on their way to do their jobs, which I think is a big change. And I think the other thing just to say is to your point about community and what Reece is saying about businesses and stuff like that. That I think over the course of time, look, Scally was here for 27 years. You fall out with people over that time, suppliers, you know, sponsors, fans. This is a completely clean slate. And I think that is the beauty of this situation, that, you know, it's kind of, look, it's a new world. And I think that was shown with Crawley, to be honest. I think a lot of people came back that haven't been for years. And also quite a lot of people that haven't been at all, to be honest, which was, I thought was a great idea. And if we could follow that through into season tickets, that'd be great. And the model that I'd urge them to maybe look at, I don't know whether it's possible, is the kind of the Bradford one, where the more season tickets you sell, the cheaper it gets for everyone who's already bought it. So I see no reason next season, as long as we stay up, I see no reason without. We're going to have a great summer if we stay up in terms of signings. Clearly, January was amazing. So imagine what the summer would be like. I think with a headwind, we could sell a good few thousand season tickets, and we could not sell out pre. I think we could 3/4 of it every game filled potentially. That's the potential at the moment.
I totally agree, and I think you used the Crawley one as an example, and obviously that was brilliant in terms of the, you know, pay what you can, and we'll talk about that in more detail. But even the Hartlepool game, there was no ticket deal there, and suddenly there was over 6,000 Gillingham fans, I think. Yeah. So that was for a team that was 24th hosting a team that was 23rd. It was never going to be, you know, nice football to watch. It was freezing cold. It was early January. People are still paying off Christmas yet. People wanted to come out and watch Gillingham Football Club. So there has to be a reason why. So I think, in a weird way, that's probably a better gauge rather than the Crawley one, because we knew loads of people were going to take advantage of Crawley at £1 or £5 or whatever. But yeah, again, it's just positive signs, isn't it? And steps in the right direction that people are coming back. You're seeing people, you know, Saturday at the front of the Rainham that you've not seen before or not seen for ages, and you think, oh, they used to come. They've obviously come back for a reason. And we know that winning football matches and a better football team on the pitch. And we go back to Tony Pulis years ago. I remember the ITV Meridian documentary that followed us through the 97-98 season. He got interviewed at the end of that campaign and said, you can have all the best facilities in the world, but if you haven't got a football team that's worth watching on the pitch, then no one's going to come and see you. So it all comes hand in hand, and we understand that football's changed differently. It's changed, you know, immensely since the late 90s, and you have to have multiple revenue streams. I've said this on plenty of videos, but first and foremost, we are a football club and a football team, and people will come and see us if that football team is performing on the pitch at 3 o'clock on a Saturday or 7:45 on a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
Yeah, I agree, mate. I think what's happened though as well is that more people like me are now paying out for things such as a season ticket, such as the kit, such as, you know, I didn't pay for the 1893 club. My mate won it off the crossbar challenge, but you know, I'd do that again happily and pay for it. So I think that those sort of things come hand in hand, like you say, with a good winning football team. But I think it is down as well to where we are in terms of the new ownership. And I think just going back to Fisher as well, mate. I said before on the last episode that I felt that he was doing superficial stuff that was very needed. but I didn't really have much say at the time. So I was slightly wrong there because he was obviously negotiating a takeover for us. But I felt like operationally, still Scally was probably the man that had the final say on things. Whereas again, I think it's been delegated to him, and I think he's a vital conduit to all of this. The bloke's he seems like a nice fella. Is the first thing I'd say. He supports the club, so he's got the passion running through his veins. And I think he's introduced a lot of things. Like I said there were only small things on the last episode, but even that little like sheet he's produced at the start of or on Saturdays for what's going on at the grounds, stuff like that. I think that's a fantastic thing. And just going back to sort of bringing new supporters in and the Crawley game, a friend of mine, he had a season ticket back in 2004-5, I think. His kid's 12. He was meant to come to the game on Saturday, his child, but he's had a sickness bug. So he brought my mate along, and both of them said they'd come again. And it's to the point where my pal, whose kid couldn't come, he's basically said to me, how much is a half season ticket? I'm tempted to buy one for me and him for the remainder of the season. So it'd be interesting to see what the byproduct is of this Crawley game, how many season tickets we sell off the back of it, and how many tickets for. I think the Grimsby game's going to be a poor barometer because it's Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
I think it'll be the one after that, Wimbledon, that will be the barometer. I think we could get 7,000 there for that game, maybe even more.
Reece, I come to you. What do you think? It's weird, isn't it? Sitting here talking and potentially thinking about attendances of 6 and 7s and 8,000s and full houses. But I think Jack has got it nailed on, and certainly about Fisher. And we've all said previously that we hoped if this takeover did come, that Fish would be able to stay on in some capacity. And I think it's great that he is doing that, and he's doing it as a non-footballing side, because he is a fan. I get that. But as a fan, maybe you don't make the correct football decisions. But as a businessman, I mean, he worked with the British Racing Board or whatever it was. I'm not sure of the official title there for donkey's years, and that's a big role to fulfil, because it's race courses up and down the entire United Kingdom. It's not just one sole business or football club. How pleased are you that Fish is staying on, and in terms of the role that he's now been given?
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously clearly played a vital role in us getting to where we are. Like Jack said, pre-takeover, so he was only really doing things that were, it's like Jack says, essential, because it seemed like obviously Scally had vanished into the background. So it did feel like, and Harris touched on this himself, that it was basically Harris and Fisher running the entire football club, which probably wasn't healthy for either of them. Because, like we're seeing now, Harris wants to focus on the football side. He doesn't have to want to worry about anything else. And yeah, it was probably quite a lot of strain on the pair of them. But yeah, to keep someone like Fisher, like you say, with his business expertise on side, and yeah, there's the early signs are there that as a complete functional unit off the pitch, whether that's the football inside, the non-football inside, they're all working really well in tandem. The camaraderie between them all at the fans forum, I think, was clear to see. They all get on. Harris touched on that as well. Must have been his pre-Crawley press conference when he was speaking about deadline day, and he said they were there all day. A lot of good banter, a lot of good laughs. I think that's really, really important, that they're all pulling forward in the same direction. They may have disagreements with finite details of things, but ultimately it seems like the main goal of the football club is all the same. They're all focused on, first and foremost, keeping us in League Two, whilst at the same time trying to look towards the future and giving us brighter times ahead. And that's being reflected both in off the pitch things, such as the Crawley ticket deal to try and bring more fans in going forward, but also on the pitch in terms of some of the business that has been done that we'll come on to.
I think as well, like we've said this already, to be fair, in terms of their personalities, but I think Fish seems like a good bloke. Gallinson seems like a good bloke. I mean, I spoke to him in Blues, hell, that's going back, Factory, a couple of at the last game, and it just seemed like nice people. And you buy into personalities, don't you? At the end of the day, I do a sales role as a job, and I like to think people buy from me because they get on with me, and I think that's the same with Brad and Fish. To be honest, I think not only are we all wanting us to do well, we support the club, but I think people genuinely want us to do well for them because they seem like good people.
What I'd say as well is that I tweeted my reservations about it when we was in really poor run of form because of some of the stuff that were being directed their way, but that I was cautious about people like Fisher and Brad having a presence on social media, because I was concerned that people, not just in football and society, people I think quickly assume that Twitter speaks for the majority of people, when in the grand scheme of things, it's actually quite a small number. So when they were being bombarded with tweets demanding Harris goes, demanding that, saying Harris is this, the players are this, you've got to do this, I was a little bit uneasy with it. But now everything's settled down, and you just look at it for what it is, the way they communicate. They're not over the top with it. They're not excessive on it. They communicate what they feel like they need to. And yeah, and I've sort of already started to change my mind on that actually the communication via sources like that is critical. It's really, really helpful. You know, when we were on poor form, they weren't getting into arguments with people. They were just brushing it aside. They knew internally what they wanted to do. And I think we're reaping the rewards of that now. And yeah, my mind has completely changed. And them having that presence they do, engaging with like yourself, Matt, the way they do, it's fantastic. It really is. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I think, as I've said before, Scally was an analog chairman in a digital era. He is a digital chairman in a digital era. That is quite simply what he is. But he's also seems like a nice person to boot with it, which happens to help, and seems to have a decent amount of money behind him. I think that's one thing. I'm not being negative with this. I think just no one's questioned this, to be fair, including me. I didn't say anything at the forum. No one asked it. But I do wonder where he's getting his money from. And I guess that's something not to worry about too much, you know. But, you know, you have to, you know, is it his personal wealth? Is it his real estate? Like, it'd be interesting to know where he's made his money from. He's never really told his backstory, I guess. And we got that with Scally, didn't we? You know, that he owned a printer business and numerous other businesses. So you kind of knew what his wealth was capable of. It'd be interesting to know whether this is all funded by Gallinson, whether it's private equity. You know, it'd be interesting to know that. So not being negative, it just would be... have we got a bottomless pit of money? I guess he probably doesn't want to communicate that because it won't help with negotiating for players in the future.
Yeah, maybe it's been kept quiet because of the fact that clubs knew we were going to be desperate to get players in January. So maybe it's something that we'll find out, you know, now that the transfer window's out of the way. I think he's due to go back to America for a period of time, and then he's back to the UK in March. So maybe it's something that comes out. And again, we don't need to know how much money Brad Galinson has and exactly where it all comes from. But yeah, I can understand the question, and the point of view is that he's answered a lot of questions and delivered on a lot of things that he's promised so far. But it'd just be nice to find out about Brad and Shannon rather than Mr. Gallinson and Mrs. Gallinson, the business people, so to speak, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And just quickly before we get onto the transfer window, back to the point about delegating and Reece said about enjoyment and stuff like that, does it also come down to the fact that maybe they've got something within them that Paul Scally didn't have? And again, it's not meant to be a dig at Paul Scally, because certainly early on and for a large portion of his reign, he did very well for us. But they seem a lot more easy with trusting other people to go and do jobs, whereas I think Paul maybe had a slight issue with that, and I might be completely wrong, but you always felt that Paul Scally always wanted to have an element of control in anything that was being done, and however big or small. Whereas the Gallinsons are quite happy to let Paul Fisher go and run this side of things, Joe Comper go and do that, whatever names I'm chucking out there, Kenny and Hesse to go and do the football side. We know Neil obviously is now trusted at least until the end of the season, I'd imagine, with the football side of things. It's just a happier place, isn't it? It's just a much happier place just for everyone to be involved with and to be about.
Absolutely. I think just what to one other point, mate, there you've said about Harris at the end of the season. I think it probably is a testament to how well we've done this last month, that I think apart from a few lone voices, no one is suggesting he should leave now. I was one of them, I'll be honest. You've probably seen it on Twitter. From middle of November to the end of December, I was fed up and felt we just needed to change. And even going into early January, I thought he's not going to get anything out of these players. I don't believe in him tactically, but I have to concede I've probably been wrong there potentially. Let's see how we get on for the remainder of the season. And I do have worries over his tactical nous, but I think it would be ludicrous to even talk about that anymore, which is a testament to how well we've done. But to your point, mate, yeah, it's a much happier, much more united football club, which is the only way, really. I know Scally said it many times, positivity is the only way we're going to go forward, but it was never really going to happen with him. He was trying to force something that was never going to happen anymore. And I think he was right with the sentiment, but we are now at that point where we can finally move on and be united.
Absolutely. Right. Back to on-field stuff, because we are a football YouTube channel, essentially. We've already mentioned the words that Brad promised us: lucrative and aggressive transfer window. Reece, I'm not sure any of us really envisaged just how aggressive and lucrative it was going to be come 11 p.m. on the 31st of January, was we?
No, I was expecting 4, maybe 5. And also we got twice that in the end. And a complete mixture of signings as well, which is really, really good. Mixture of experience, mixture of youth, proven quality at this level, quality that we're hoping will come at this level in the future. Signs that we're not just buying for the here and now, as important that is. We're going back to something Jack's always said: can we bring players in that may potentially have resale value for us in the future? So I think that the whole concept of the January window, and we've sort of swatted that aside a little bit, because Harris himself said that January is a horrible window to try and buy players, and it's really hard to have successful windows in January. And we've sort of just blown that apart with the business we've done. And yeah, it has to be a 10 out of 10 window. I know we can be picky and say we'd rather have a left back on top of what we've got, but
I
let's be
said
honest, just look at what we've done.
I said 9.5 out of 10 because we didn't sign a left back. I think if we got a left back, it was 10 out of 10.
I'd probably go along with 9 out. Sorry, mate, go on.
It's the fact that we've not just signed players hoping they're going to come in and do the business. We've signed players that have been able to come in and instantly hit the ground running, instantly settle into a Harris team and be able to execute the tactics and the game plan he wants. I was really optimistic that, and I was quite public in my defence of Harris, that I said once we get some better players in, the form will improve.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't expect 10 points from the first 4 games.
Should have been 12 really as well, to be fair.
Yeah,
probably
should have massively exceeded my expectation how quickly we're kicking on from the window. I thought it would take a month, 6 weeks, but like you said, Jack, it's a good job it has, because other teams around us have been picking up points with us, and if it weren't for this good start, we'd be in a hole regardless of what squad we have now.
Yeah, I think 9.5 for me. If I've always said the barometer for me for a good signing is their record good on paper, and are the fans that they're leaving behind furious that they're leaving? And I think bar probably Coleman and Clark, who were never signings that were going to be of that ilk anyway, and maybe Abrahams. I think that's the only one where I've questioned, where I've gone, I'm not sure on that one. I think everyone else is an absolutely fantastic signing. So when you tot it all up together, I'd say probably 9.5 as well, purely because I think Abraham seems like a bit of a panic signing. I'll give him time, but it was the only one where I went, I'm not sure on that. And we maybe could have done with a left back, and we thought we were going to get one based on rumours and stuff like that. So, 9 3/4 maybe. Let's go with that. Let's go Harry Potter, 9 3/4. So looks like I've got Gryffindor curtains behind me, didn't I? That's what Gills curtains look like, Gryffindor curtains. But 9 3/4 I'll go with. Very, very, very good window. And I think the thing for me is, even though we're 23rd, and it's obviously very disappointing to see everyone win the other day, there's no doubt in my mind we're going to stay up. I'm not even worried, not remotely worried. I'm already thinking about next season. What can we do next season? And it's maybe a bit dodgy to be thinking like that. Hopefully the players have got that confidence, but equally temper it slightly and make sure they win games and don't think they're just going to brush teams over. But I think we'll stay up, and I think the players we've signed, to a man, pretty much all of them are really, really good signings, and it's got vibes of Scally early doors again. He signed quite a lot of free transfers in his first season, but for the first few seasons we signed some good quality players for money, and the money we then use to resell on and buy again. And I get the feeling that's what Gallinson's going for.
It's weird you should say that, because I've just been listening to the Under the Cost podcast today, because there's a Tony Pulis episode's just got out. It's the first one of the new series, and he talks about when he arrives at Gillingham and said it was a clean slate. Pretty much everyone was out of contract that season. And he said he signed Dio for 5,000 and Dennis Bailey for 35, 40,000 from QPR. But people like Dave Martin, Mark Harris, Jim Stannard all come in on free transfers, and they were proper warriors and proper people that knew how to get out of that division. So it comes back to what Reece mentioned, and I've written down as well. There's plenty in there for the here and now, but there's also some in there that you think will do a job for us for the next 2 or 3 years. And people like Clark and Coleman are probably for even longer term. if it works out. But even if it doesn't, they're quite low risk because they're young. They're not going to be on a great deal of wages. So it's very clever business. We know Hesse has loads of contacts around Kent and the non-league scene. So he'd have looked at these players a lot. Kenny Jackett's obviously got links to Coleman as well, being Leyton Orient. So I get what you're saying. I can understand it because no one saw the Abraham one coming. But to play devil's advocate, I'm assuming we don't know how late the Scott Cashkett injury came, do we, in the window? Obviously, Lewis Walker's out for the rest of the season. It seems that Cash is going to miss 5-6 weeks. So you're looking at mid-March. And we was all concerned that if Ollie Hawkins got injured, we didn't have a like for like, I think, because we all know that Neil Harris's sides live and die by a proper target man. And unfortunately, Mika Mandron was not that for whatever reason. Hawkins got injured Saturday. And I thought Aidan O'Brien was absolutely spot on for half an hour. I thought he was so good,
absolutely.
Considering a player that's not really played football for the last 3 months. I thought he was really, really good. So, yes, some are padding out the squad, but we need to have that. And we've not had that for too long, have we? That's the biggest thing for me, is that we now do have some sort of depth. Stuart O'Keefe was one of our best players for 2 seasons under Evans. He's not getting in the squad now. That shows you suddenly where we are, that we can afford to leave our club captain out through choice, not through necessity.
My only frustration, I think, I'm putting the left back bit aside and saying Abrahams is not a great signing. You know, we were linked with Marriott and Shimanga. Whether they were ever remotely possible or not is probably not. But it does go to show that no matter how much money you've got, you're bandying around at this level, that signing a striker is probably the hardest thing you can do. And we've been quite lucky with Nichols, really, because his goal record doesn't suggest he's a 3-4 man. But he stepped up to the plate massively. But it would have been nice to have a real out-and-out goal scorer. That'd be the only thing I'd say would have been the absolute icing on the cake, but it's nitpicking.
It is. It's just nice to not have a centre-back who's top scorer in the league, let's be honest.
Absolutely.
We've said it already, and we're getting to the final portion of the episode now. We've already said whole club feels different. We've mentioned more structure on and off the pitch. I want to talk about one person. I feel we have to talk about him. Paul Scally has been kept on. And I think we all agreed when the announcement first came, and a lot of people agreed on Twitter and social media, that it seems a sensible decision from Brad Galinson. Let's peel away all the layers of the onion regarding what we think of Paul Scally and his demeanour and his personality. You're not a chairman of an EFL football club, Reece, for 27 years without having some knowledge of the English game and not having some business acumen. For me, it's a no-brainer. I think it's a brilliant decision by Brad to keep him in the background. And I think there's been a couple of people have said that he's had a lot to do with getting the deals over the line in the transfer window as well. So we have to give him credit for that if we're going to give credit to Kenny Jackett, Andy Hessenthaler and everyone else. But it just feels like it's potentially the start of maybe a phasing out period of time for Paul Scally, because he's not a young man now. And we've said this on previous episodes. There will come a point where he just wants to ride off into the sunset and retire. He's got his minority stake. So if the club does well and grows in terms of value, he makes money. But what did you make of the whole Paul Scally in the background thing? So I know there was a lot of people that were still a little bit sort of concerned that he was going to have a presence around the football club.
No, I'm not too bothered about it, to be honest, because obviously Brad's come in with... He might have done his research into English football, and it seems like he has, the way he spoke about it, but he wouldn't have known from inside a boardroom how transfers work. So obviously Fish was here back before I started going, apparently, but football's changed so much in the last 20 years. And to be honest, my biggest problem with Scally was the fact he didn't have the resources to back up things he said. That's not a problem now, because ultimately it's not him resourcing the football club. So no, if they are just using him as a soundboard and reaping the benefits of experience, and that's all it is, then yeah, that's absolutely fine. I've not got any problem with that at all, to be honest.
I think my issue with him was how adversarial he was with the fans and the relationship he had with suppliers and other things like that, potential sponsors. And I think as long as you keep him in the background doing what he's good at and don't have him on communications, then I think you're probably onto a winner. And I think in any business, if you look at any business that gets taken over, typically they do keep a director on for a year anyway. I'm not suggesting he's going to swan off after a year, but this is commonplace in most businesses. So it'd be interesting to see what happens next December, you know, a year's time, whether he's still here or not. He's approaching his 70s. You know, he's still going to games. I was in the top tier of the Medway Stand the other day because of doing the 1893 club, and he was still going, or he was going to games now. So it'd be interesting to see what the long game is. I think as long as he's kept in the background, doesn't put any communications out, then I don't see any problem with it personally. And,
No.
and as Reece says, the money side of things, that's not an issue now, is it?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Because when he was trying to get these deals over the line with his own money, we couldn't afford to do it. So it was, again, it comes back to your comment about, you know, champagne aspirations with lemonade budget and that type of thing. He was promising us these players, but couldn't actually get them over the line. Whereas now he's able to get the deals over the line because Brad Galinson can fund it properly. So essentially his job role doesn't change. He's just able to fulfill that job role better. But yeah, I was just curious because I didn't think we could go through a whole episode and not talk about a takeover without bringing Paul Scally up. And I think generally I agree is the fact that it will be a phasing out process, however long. But as long as he stays in the background and the face is Brad and or Shannon and Fish, then I'm absolutely fine with it. Another thing I want to talk about, and we've always mentioned it, and I mentioned it when I talk about doing my channel. And it is our birthday today, Gills fans. So thank you for all the birthday wishes. The channel is officially 6, which is mad, to be quite frank. So thank you to everyone that's wished the channel happy birthday. Thank you to everyone that continues to watch episodes like this and watch the matchday lives and the Monday reviews and the preview shows and the Gills Legends chats when we get to do them.
You look younger, mate. You look younger, by the way, today than you did 6 years ago. I don't know what you've been doing.
I had a heavy cold that day, and a couple of people said that to me. Yeah, I was really struggling that day. It was probably the worst day to launch it. Maybe it's just because we've been taken over. Anyway, I digress again. The point I was trying to make is that I do this channel not to make money or to gain anything, and I do gain stuff. I get, you know, like these T-shirts I've been given as a, you know, as a gift to help another company out and that type of thing. But that's never been the reason I do this channel. I do this channel because I love Gillingham Football Club. I do this channel because I love talking about football and talking about Gillingham Football Club, and we get to do these types of things. I forgot what I was going to say. Yes. I just think, and I do it because it brings fans that can't go to games and can't get to football matches on a regular basis for whatever reason, whether that's, you know, they live abroad, they're expats, or they live the other end of the country, so they can only do the odd away game in the north, or, you know, ill health stops them from going regularly. It bridges the gap between the football club and the fan base. And I'm, without wanting to sound big-headed, I think if I've been doing it for 6 years and people are still willing to watch, then I'm doing it okay. But it's great now to see that the football club are buying into that as well. I've had Fish on the channel recently to review a game against Colchester. I know the players and the staff are listening to James and Owen's ME7 spaces on Twitter. The Her Game 2 thing's taking off. We're getting players involved. We've already mentioned Reece, Fish and Brad, without going over the top and telling people stuff they don't need to know or interacting on social media. It just feels like, and again, it comes back to what you said, Jack, that everyone's pulling in the right direction, but it just feels that gap between the fan base and the football club itself is as close as it's ever been for a long time now.
Yeah, I agree, mate. I think, do you know what, mate? It's one of those where, not that we'd ever want this, but the feeling around the club right now, if we was in the National South, I'd still love the way the vibe is around the club. I think that's part of the beauty of going to it. You want to see a winning football team, and you want to be in as high a league as possible, but you want to actually enjoy it. And I think that's essentially what had left us for a very long time, you know, but at least for the last year and a half, at the very, very least. And obviously we had COVID and weren't able to go and stuff like that. So I just feel like we're all falling back in love with the club again. And it's great to see. And hopefully a lot more new fans fall in love with the club along the way.
Yeah, I can't emphasise that enough. And Reece, just to come to you before we start looking at finishing up, I think Jack alluded to it a little while ago, and obviously it's helped him out because he got a free day out because someone hit the crossbar a few weeks ago. Just the whole match day experience just feels a lot better again, doesn't it? I mean, we go back years ago, the Justin Edinburgh season, God rest his soul. We had, the GFC Gems, the mascots. There were ball boys at every game. We were playing well. There was, not full houses, but, we were 2/3 full every week. Everyone wanted to come and watch Gillingham Football Club. They weren't doing it because they bought a season ticket and they thought, I've paid that money, so I've got to go and do it. It became chore-like for too long. You walked out of a game under Steve Evans. I've never done that. I've not got to that point, but I've been very close a few times. And probably, if I didn't do the channel, I probably would have taken that decision as well. And people might disagree with that or agree with it, and that's fine. That's why we talk about different things, and that's why we love chatting about football. It's got better on the pitch as well, hasn't it? Which helps. But that whole day out just feels more appealing now. Like Jack said, he's had his afternoon in the 1893 club because someone's hit the crossbar at half time. There's stuff that keeps you engaged, even the little things. And I'd written that down as well, like the sheet that we get that informs us of, the factory opens at this time. There's going to be bacon rolls available. The goalkeepers come out and warm up at 2:05. The rest of the squad will be out at 20:00. We had notification, sadly, of a young lad that had passed away recently over Christmas and New Year and was only 15. So there was a minute's applause. And I've already said, and I'll say it again, you send love and best wishes to that family. But it's just being kept in the loop and everyone knowing what's going on and when it's going on makes you want to be a part of it. And of course, it helps that the boys on the football pitch are actually, making us want to watch that side of it as well. But like Jack said, you feel now and I don't think it will, and I don't think any of us think that, we did get relegated. With the way the atmosphere is around the football club at the moment, you'd probably be more inclined to still go and watch us in the National League. Whereas if you go back 6 months, you'd have no inclination to go and set foot and watch us play if we get relegated, because you turned up, there was nothing happening beforehand, there was out-of-date beer being sold, there was nothing in terms of the way of decent food. We've got all these outlets under the Rainham, they're barely open. Let's hope that progress continues and we get all them open again. But the whole day out and social aspect of football, it seems to have returned in recent weeks.
Yeah, the match day experience, we've criticised it for a long time, and it's massively changed recently. Look, like yourself and Jack said, the sheet in advance of games, so people know timings of what's going on, is really, really good. We had, can't remember, it must have been the home game before last, where a load of legends were paraded before the pitch. We had Saturday, where Doug said, it's only silly things, but Doug said that there was going to be no more announcements in the last half an hour before kickoff, but they wanted to play some sort of more pump up match kind of music, which is good. And then, you talk about the food outlets. I was sitting there for the game Saturday and Owen turned up and walked up the stairs with a pot of pasta and meatballs. I was like, where have you got that from? And he was like, from the back of the Rainham end. So the progress is being made. And it is silly things like that you want to make it that there's no guarantees in football of what happens on the pitch, but you want to make sure that if we do lose, people don't walk away and that's all they have to cling on to. It's the fact that, well, we've lost, but this has happened, that's happened. I've been in good company, had a bit of food, drink in the factory, and I've still had an all right day with my mates, kind of thing. And that had been lost ultimately. And fortunately, that seems to be coming back now, which is good.
I think alongside it, you could make the argument, well, we don't have to feel like this. If you basically what I'm going to say is we feel valued again. I think before it was considered like, come to the game, you Gillingham fans, what are you doing not turning up? You got a lot of to and fro in between the owner and there was a lot of needle and a lot of just bad vibes really. Whereas now it feels like you're actually valued and wanted to be at the game rather than just expected. And I think just the whole mindset of the ownership and the management team has made it a more enjoyable experience alongside all the things you've just said there as well.
Yeah, totally agree. And like you say, being valued again, it comes back to, I know it's a bit picky, but the fact that, we donated money off our season tickets after COVID and we were promised this and that in terms of memberships, the clubs never got it. It was almost like they took it for granted that we were just going to give them their money and that'd be swept under the carpet. But we're staying positive, Gills fans. Just quickly before we wrap up, on the pitch has improved drastically in the last few weeks as well. We know the league form's improved. Beat Hartlepool 2-0. Well, full value for the win. Went to Colchester, put in a really good away performance. Swindon, slightly frustrating being 3-1 up, I understand that. But if we'd been offered a 0-0 or a 1-0 before kickoff, we'd have taken the point. So we moved. Crawley, not our best first half. So it was another different type of wing. Came out absolutely the best side second half and deserved the 3 points. But before we do finish up, I want to talk about the Leicester City game, because that was Brad Galinson, Shannon Gallinson's, and then their kids' first game. Seeing Gillingham Football Club and its supporters and what they're about and what we are in terms of being at our very best. And it was 8,500. I know Leicester bought a good portion of fans, but there were still 6,500 Gills fans in there. Rainham was packed to the rafters. The Medway stand was decent in terms of an atmosphere as well, because I sat in there that day. We didn't disgrace ourselves on national TV. That is what we can be moving forward, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I would say so. We've got the potential. We always have done. We just need someone to realise that potential, and I think that's what we've got now. Obviously, we've got to stay in the league. We've got to make sure we do that first. But I can't wait to see what happens next if we do stay in the league. I can't wait for the summer to see who we sign. I can't wait for the things that they're going to potentially suggest. You know, maybe a new Brian Moore stand, one befitting of his name. You know, maybe with a terrace, perhaps with a bit of safe standing, which would be nice. Just so many things that they're going to, but things that are realistic, and hopefully we're not promised stuff that they're not going to deliver on. I just can't wait to see what they do next as a football club.
And Reece, just some final thoughts from you before we finish this episode up.
No, that Leicester game, obviously, like I've said, I wasn't around when Scally took over, and that whole moment when Brad and the family walked around the pitch, sort of, I didn't speak to anyone while I was going. I sort of stood and just sort of took it in for what it was, and I think that was then, obviously, reading the club statement is one thing, but that was the moment for me when it was like, that's happening. You're looking around Priestful to Fall, and it's like, it's happening. Things are actually changing, and they're changing quickly as well. You know, we went up to Swindon together the other week. Why are we taking 1,000 fans up to Swindon? 4 weeks earlier, would have taken 200. It's crazy. It's incredible.
We've sold over 500 for Mansfield this coming Saturday as well, haven't we? And that's a much longer trip. No, fair play to you. Unfortunately, I can't make it this week, but yeah, hoping to do a few more away days before the end of the season. And that's the change, isn't it? And that's the Brad Galinson effect, I suppose. And I know there's one particular individual on Twitter who is producing what seems like an album full of songs at the moment. And then everyone's jumping on the bandwagon. I've been tagged in poems and stuff over the last few days on social media. It's great to see. And, you know, they might not be the best songs or the best poems. They're still better than what I can produce before anyone jumps down my throat. But it's just great to see everybody having fun. And like we say, I think the key words are pulling in the right direction. One last question before I let you both go and enjoy the rest of your evenings. Are we getting relegated?
No chance. Not
Absolutely
a chance. Well, I was quite happy to take 66-1 on us getting the top half the day Gallinson took over, whereas Jack's gone one better, and Jack's looking at Wembley dates, I think. That's what I've heard.
I've done both.
I get 10 grand back if we get promoted. So come on, boys. Come on, you can do it. Believe.
I think we've got to go. I think someone was having a chat with Gabe Sutton on social media today and said we've got to go out along about 2.4 points per game to get into the playoffs. So 15
wins out of 19. It ain't going to happen, is it?
But it's one hell of an end to the season, isn't it?
We can dream.
Gents, as always, it's been a real pleasure. And I can genuinely say that this time because,
yeah,
you know what I mean. It's a pleasure talking to you both, but it's a pleasure talking about the subjects that we've been able to talk about tonight. Gills fans, if you're still listening, still watching, thank you very much as always. Like I've already said, I really appreciate the support. Anyone who's on the channel appreciates the support. Without you lot retweeting, replying, commenting on YouTube, Facebook, whatever it is, this channel doesn't do anything. It just sits there idle. So I cannot say thank you enough. Don't forget that these videos now are in association with Art of Football. So go and check out their website. I will put the link to their site in the description at the bottom of the video for all your T-shirts, your hoodies, your bucket hats, your prints, and all the such. And again, that was another prime example of brilliant stuff being done and the community feel around the club at the moment. They went and dished out a load of free T-shirts in the cricketers just before the Crawley game, which was great to see. So go and show your support to them. Not travelling to Mansfield at the weekend, unfortunately. Jack will be one of, hopefully, 500, 600, 700. There's still a couple of days to go that are travelling north to hopefully watch us get something. But until then, thanks for your support as always. We will see you soon. And up the Gills.